It is Wednesday, my dudes, and that's right, we're back in Planet Coaster, or more specifically, back here in Velocity Lake, because, yes, I actually finally know the name of this park. I mean, it's been named now for 3 weeks for you guys, provided I get this video uploaded on time, for 3 weeks, but in the past two commentaries, I said I wasn't sure what this park's called. That has now changed. 2 minutes before I published the video, I suddenly decided on the name Velocity Lake, and you know what? We're sticking with it. So, what are we doing in this episode of Velocity Lake? Well, so far, we have built the entrance plaza and the Intamin Light coaster. Mega-Lite, I should say. So, we need to kind of, there's a few T's to cross and I's to dot. So, adding some fencing to the ends of the bridge, adding some bit more lighting. And we're going to start doing some curbing along the pathways coming off the bridge and, onto the main plaza that guests will come to when they first get onto the main island of the theme park. And then we're also going to be building the station for the roller coaster, as well as building our first flat ride. So lots of exciting things to look forward to, guys. You're going to have a whale of a time. I was trying to come up with some sort of pun or clever phrase, but I didn't. And that was that. There you are. You're welcome. So yeah, curbing in this game, it's pretty boring, but it definitely works out well. I mentioned one of the things in the first episode that whenever people make things in Planet Coaster, they never really look like, well, at least like most players. Obviously, you've got the very, very skilled players on YouTube and stuff, not including myself, obviously. People like Rubble Trilliums, Bro Coaster, Masked Bandit, Silverette, obviously. When they build parks, they don't look like they're made in Planet Coaster in a sense, if that makes sense. Like, they look like they could be real parks, whereas people posting, normies, you can tell, like, oh, look, it looks like a Planet Coaster park. And that's because I think one of the big driving factors is, A, the parks often just consist of lots of pathways connecting, whereas in real life, theme parks aren't really a series of paths. The whole ground is path. But also whenever there are paths, the curbs don't really look like the kind of curbs that Planet Coaster has. Variable Gaming actually said it in a recent video where he said the actual default curbs that come with the paths in Planet Coaster and the fences attached to them to a slightly lesser extent, they're slightly chunkier and slightly bigger than what they would probably be in real life. So it gives them this very cartoonish look, and it gives them that classic sort of Planet Coaster look. So when going for realism, I find that, making the curbs yourself tends to look slightly better. RIP, that station that we made last week. Sorry for boring you guys with watching the station build last week and then having to watch it all over again. I mean, granted, it's very, very similar this week. It's pretty much the same as the first iteration of the station, but slightly more refined. I've had a couple of times actually in Planet Coaster where the game's crashed and then I've had to rebuild it, and it's always really deeply annoying when that happens because I've wasted hours of my life that I could have spent well, it doesn't matter. I could have spent doing something else. But then when I actually do it again, it always turns out much better. So it's always a little bit bittersweet, I suppose. And this time, I think the station turned out a lot better than the first iteration. So even though it's very similar in terms of its architectural style, it's, I guess, if I'm going to put a label on it at all, it will probably be Alpine style, but it's pretty much, I wanted something rustic but generic looking for the main island because, like I said, this is meant to be the central hub of the theme park, so I didn't want any kind of overt theming. There will be one themed ride on this island, which you'll see when we get to it, but it's a small ride. It's not a big thing. Like, it's one of those rides which has theming built into it, so you kind of have to theme it to an extent, but it's very I don't know, covert, scaled back theming. For the most part, all the big stuff's going to be the same sort of architectural style, very generic looking, just so, I don't know, it serves as a good central hub for no real reason, I suppose, because there's no law that states that central hubs in theme parks need to be generically themed, but that's the rule I set myself here. So we kind of got this big building that has the maintenance shed attached to it in this sort of separate wing. We'll be building I don't think we built the transfer track this episode. I've kind of edited a lot of episodes together, but then haven't made the commentary, so I can just quickly get videos made if I'm running late, but I also want to be recording the commentaries somewhat on a regular basis, like week on week, so that the actual content is relevant. With that being said, for me, it's currently the 22nd of May, so I'm recording this just exactly 1 week in advance, because I'm away next week and during the weekend as well, so I probably won't have much opportunity to edit. Well, I'll have no opportunity to develop a Planet Coaster video between now and next Wednesday. So this is one of the exceptions, and I might do next Wednesday's video as well, as in the Wednesday after, next Wednesday for you guys, just so I'm definitely staying ahead of the curve. Although I posted, because today, for me, last week for you guys, I posted a picture of the Intamin Mega-Lite on Twitter, and one of the replies was, why is your channel veering away from Kerbal Space Program and towards Planet Coaster? And first of all, I want to debunk this. Planet Coaster has been on this channel since 2016, as a regular series since 2017, I think, or early 2017, late 2016. It's been on here for a while, basically, and it's never been the intention for Planet Coaster to replace Kerbal Space Program by any means whatsoever. It's just Planet Coaster is one of those games I really like, and I'll be playing it regardless of whether or not I was a YouTuber, in quotes. And I thought it would be nice, because I guess people that play Kerbal Space Program like the kind of more niche, nerdy games and more creative games, which Planet Coaster definitely fits into the creative game niche. And, it's very easy for me to make Planet Coaster content. That's the main reason why you may see some weeks where there's Planet Coaster content, but not Kerbal Space Program content. It's not that I've prioritized Planet Coaster. It's because Kerbal Space Program, a typical KSP video, takes anywhere from usually about 6 to 8 hours, oftentimes a lot more than that. Planet Coaster takes half an hour at most to make a video for. So in a week, I may only have half an hour's worth of editing time, so I can make the beginning of a Kerbal Space Program video that wouldn't be ready till the following week anyway, or I could at least make a Planet Coaster video and have some content to please YouTube's algorithm and not, shut down my entire channel. So that's the kind of compromise I come up with. It's not that Planet Coaster is replacing Kerbal Space Program week on week or anything like that. It's just that Planet Coaster, it's much more efficient to create videos, and it's much easier to create videos. So that's why some weeks there will be Planet Coaster content but no Kerbal Space Program content. But I'm hoping those weeks, regardless, will be very few and far between. I have no intention of having some weeks without KSP, even though the week just gone for me, I didn't have KSP. I was busy again, guys. Hey, look at this. Just veering the topic away from Kerbal Space Program. We did indeed build the transfer track. I pondered out loud if I'd done it. That's why I should have probably watched this footage back before I started rambling over it. But I go with this series. I don't tend to ever think in general, really. I just don't think. This is the story of my life. With transfer tracks, obviously they're completely non-functional in this game that you just have to kind of picture. So I guess I tended to look at images of transfer tracks when I first started making them. These days I just sort of say, yeah, that looks like it would be a mechanism that works and makes sense logically speaking, so I'll do it this way. You might think this is totally unrealistic, and if you do feel that way, please do feel free to keep those feelings to yourself. Here we are constructing the interior of the station. Obviously we've done the exterior. Yeah, I used to just slap a roof on buildings, but I thought it looks a little bit better to have some sort of, not greebling, but, interior detail showing the structure of the roof. Obviously, in Planet Coaster, it's all totally superficial. I mean, the coasters work without any supports whatsoever if you wanted to have them that way. It's all there to just kind of look nice, I suppose. So again, just doing this sort of double plank stacking layer construction style, which I don't think is actually a particularly realistic way of building roof structures, but never mind. And then we'll build like a slightly more complete structure for it by adding some vertical supports, but I didn't want to add those until we'd actually placed the roof on top, so I knew exactly how high those vertical supports had to extend. And there's the roof, nothing special really. A lot of RCT3 stations have this look where they have the kind of shallow slope on either side, and then there's a steeper kind of separate roof bit. I don't really know my roofing terminology in the middle. That was typical for a lot of RCT3 stations, I think. I don't know why. I used to build all my RCT3 stations like this, and a lot of people I knew and people I saw online built their stations that way as well. So to me, it's the typical RCT3 way of building a station. But hey, I think it looks good. So it was kind of justified as being a cliche. Can you have cliches for the construction of roller coaster stations? You can now. This channel breaks ground, truly. In the most unoriginal ways. So I built those planks underneath the roof just to kind of give it a bit more kind of thickness with 2 C's, thickness, some structure, just kind of make it look a bit better. It's the little details in Planet Coaster, And then once we've built the structure, we can then sink it all down and get ready for completion. So I'll copy across those interior beams as well as the lighting attached to them, just well, I'm just sort of now dictating what's on screen. This is why I don't tend to look too much at the screen when doing these commentaries, because I then just end up just saying what's on the screen. Like, here we are saving, and then now we're just going to change the color of the cars. And then we're going to just have a quick POV. I'll do the real-time POV at the very end. This is just me making sure the smoothing all looks good. I went with the blue and yellows theming because, you know, these Intamin Mega-Lites, they're not ever a specific color. In fact, I know for a fact there are blue. There are at least one blue Intamin Mega-Lite in the world. And also it kind of looks like Millennium Force. As I said, I feel like I'm now repeating all the things I said last week, but it looks a bit like Millennium Force. So I did toy with the cute name of calling it Century Force. Obviously Century being a smaller than a Millennium, and this being smaller than Millennium Force, even though it's a similar looking ride in terms of its track construction and admittedly in no other way whatsoever. But I don't know what to say. What do you want from me, guys? It's done. Let's just get to a lighting. I tend to set the lighting to a night, obviously, when it comes to lighting, just so I can see exactly what the lights are going to look like. I always find it's quite difficult to light bits of the track in this game because I suck. And also, I just feel like the spotlights aren't particularly bright. Like, I feel like these streetlights seem way brighter than the spotlights. Probably isn't true. It's probably just me not knowing how to use the spotlights correctly. But regardless, we're going to just place them on the path like this. We'll do the curbing afterwards in a similar fashion to the curbing we did before. All in on this island, we're going to do that standard kind of brown brick curb with a green fence, just because I like the way it looked. Obviously, I do still use the default fences that come with the paths if you toggle the railing on elevated or railing on ground path from time to time. Just things like the queue line for the ride, I thought it just looked a little bit better because it's a curvy queue, and when pathways are curvy, especially if the curves aren't very sharp, kind of custom fencing can look a little bit naff unless you're using toolkit items from the workshop, and I try to avoid using those toolkit items, honestly, because I think part of the charm of looking at Planet Coaster Parks, and I guess one of the things I find impressive when looking at people who are really good at this game, is how they've achieved the look of certain things using stock parts. A bit like, you know, when you see the cool Lego sets or cool Lego models you see online, you think, wow, I actually have the parts, but I just don't have the skill to use them this way. It's kind of cool seeing parts that you wouldn't ever really think of being used in that situation, or just seeing how you can use parts effectively. I always liked seeing that in other people's content, and so I thought I'd try and do that myself, you know, sticking to the default parts and trying to use creative solutions for overcoming problems. Probably not to as good an extent as, you know, more skilled players at this game, but hopefully to an extent that it is at least somewhat entertaining for you guys at home. So that's kind of why I'm not using Steam Toolkit items. And so for that reason, I used the default railings for the queue line for this ride. And also because for things like staircases, it's nice to just be able to keep the same fence. You can't really use the kind of normal fence pieces for building up stairs, just because the actual vertical components of a fence, when you build them going up a slope, they end up pointing kind of perpendicular to the slope surface if you use the fence pieces in Planet Coaster, unless of course you make your own fences using, you know, individual pieces. But if you're just using the fence parts, the vertical parts of the fence point perpendicularly, like outwards away from the ground and not straight up vertically, whereas the default railings that come with the pathways, if you set them on, they still maintain kind of a vertical, it still points upwards. I really hope that made sense. I feel like I've got on a bit of a tangent. I tend to have this picture in my mind of what I'm trying to talk about, and then I keep on visualizing it, and then I end up stumbling over myself trying to summarize it. Anyway, 13 and a half minutes in, we're going to be getting to what's actually on the thumbnail of this video, which is the construction of this park's first flat ride. And there it is, it's finished. So we did that. We just need to make the queue line cover, though. I didn't like just the queue out in the open, all exposed to the elements. You know, the harsh winter you can see around us. Let's build a little housing around it. And since we're so close to the coaster station, I thought it would be good to try and keep a somewhat consistent architectural style. So it's going to be built to pretty much match the look of the coaster building. I think it's actually, I can't remember if I actually connected the two. I don't think I did, because I don't know why I would do that. So I'm pretty sure it remains a separate building, but I think it was, I designed it like from a distance to look like it could be part of the same building, or at least, you know, the same complex. Like one is like a barn and one is a farm. I don't know why I'm going with farm analogies, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean? It's the same architectural style. So kind of stone lower bit and then wooden upper bit. Bit is the correct architecture nomenclature, I'm pretty sure. And then just using the spooky supports to, I don't know, create a sort of backbone for the structure. I'm just sort of winging it at this point. It's been a long day, guys. I'm very, very hot. I have this little fan on my desk, but I can't turn it on because if I turn it on, it will get picked up on the microphone and it will make my commentary even more annoying than it normally is to hear that whining in the background. So I'm sweltering. My PC, it's like an Aga. It's huge. It generates a lot of heat. I'm hot. I'm bothered. It's very warm. I could open the window. But I'm sitting here recording this commentary, and it seems like a lot of effort to pause my commentary to get up and open the window. And even then, I know as soon as I do that, my road will go from being this nice, quiet suburban road to being the busiest piece of highway in the UK. So I'll probably just sit here and suffer because we're nearly at the end. Like, let's just zoom out. How far are we? Okay, we've still got a little while to go. How long is it? It's 20 minutes long. Wow, look at that. I managed to hit the 20-minute mark. So we've got 5 minutes to talk about things without getting too sidetracked. So as you can see here, I was struggling a little bit to get the roof to work here. So I actually used a separate roof piece and very painstakingly angled it so it would actually fill in this awkward gap that I ended up with in the structure. But I think all things considered, it came out okay. But you can see that roof piece wasn't quite long enough to span it, so I had to duplicate it again. One of the issues with that in Planet Coaster is there's a bit of a zero frame problem, whereas when you have, well, I guess all games, but it's most exemplified in games like Planet Coaster, where if you have two objects sharing the same space, it ends up zero framing, that they both fight to have their pixels on display, so you get this sort of weird, shimmery, glitchy look. So it's quite hard. So that's why I often offset parts when it doesn't make much sense, because I'm only offsetting them by like a millimeter. That's why, is to avoid the zero framing glitch. And it's a big problem in Kerbal Space Program as well. So that's why you often see me sort of slightly offsetting wing pieces, that sort of thing, just to avoid that spazzy looking zero framing. If you know what I'm talking about, you'll know. If you're not, then I guess that goes for any conversation, doesn't it? If you know what I'm talking about, you'll understand me. But if you don't understand English, then you won't know what I'm talking about. Going to a slightly easier to talk about conversation. Here we are returning to the fences. Let's see if I'm a bit more coherent than the last time I talked about fences, where I seem to go on and on about the default fences having a vertical component to them when built on slopes. We're not dealing with any slopes, luckily. I mean, I think this is actually the first park I've attempted to use actual terrain leveling, like as in varied terrain heights in a park. So sometimes when this fencing goes uphill, I'm having to just basically build it and then drag the curbs down so it maintains, like, it will still remain level, but I'll have to use the curbs to kind of gradually stagger their way up the slope. If that makes sense. It's hard, again, for me to talk about this without it currently being on screen so you can just see. But again, that loops back to you can just see what I'm doing. I don't really need to highlight it. Was I saying just earlier that I tend to just talk about exactly what's going on screen verbatim, and I guess it must be really annoying. So I have to sometimes take a step back, not look directly at what's going on the screen, and just go with the flow. So I built this little plaza here. In Planet Coaster, you can't just build big, open, square areas of path unless you are... That was a bad choice of words, because you can do it if you're building perfect squares. But if you want a nice, organic-looking path shape, which is pretty much every plaza in real life ever in theme parks, then you end up with these little gaps. So luckily, I think it was the Classic Rides update. The Vintage Pack, not the Classic Rides update. The Vintage Pack came with these cool little planters. They make excellent pieces of scenery to fill in the holes that you get when you build plazas in this game. I then experimented with other ways of plugging the slightly smaller ones. So I tried rocks at first, but it looked bad. So I thought I was going to change it. Well, I did end up changing it from rocks to something else. I guess they're still rocks for now. So enjoy the moment while you can, guys. They ain't going to be around for very long. So I thought, just to break up some of the monotony of just having a fence running along this path, we'd add a few little minor sort of small attractions. So we've got a couple of vending machines. We just built a cash machine back there as well, or ATM for you Americans watching. And, a couple of vending machines there. Then we can just carry on building the path as we were. It is kind of hard to build vending machines with this kind of path, with this kind of curbing, because you can see it adds that little nub in between the two vending machines. So I had to fill that in with a little plant pot, but not too obvious unless you really know it's there and you're looking for it. So I was satisfied with it overall. So there's pretty much the inner curbing for the actual main plaza itself. There's this pathway going along here, which we will flesh out in the upcoming episodes, but right now it is just a path. And as you said, I am trying to avoid just paths wherever possible. I mean, obviously, they're inevitable and you have to have them in places, but having as many plazas as you can is a great way of ensuring that your park looks a bit more realistic than your standard Planet Coaster build. So yeah, I decided just to build this all the way along to the entrance of the blue coaster, and then that pretty much wraps up the curbing required for this episode, I think. I think that's all the curbing we're going to do. Yeah, remember I said there was that nub there? Just fill it in with a plant pot. And do I ever get round to replacing those rocks? I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it. That's pretty much wrapped this episode's content up. So next week, I believe we're going to build another flat ride as well as some more shops. I'll leave you with this lovely scenic view. There was a lovely scenic view, and now it's the end screen. But on screen, there are links to a video chosen for you by YouTube's selection recommendation algorithm, as well as a link to the full playlist for this series. This is a link to subscribe and to check out the Patreon if you want. And obviously, Instagram, Twitter, and Discord in the description. Goodbye.